Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski with Everything MSP here. Welcome to today's webinar, The Results Selling Framework. Ask better questions and sell better. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us. Greatly appreciate you being here. We've got a very exciting session lined up for you. If you've ever felt like you're saying the same things as every other MSP when meeting with prospects, and you've struggled to stand out and connect, today's framework is going to give you the tools to change that. This isn't about selling harder, it's about selling smarter. It's about thinking like your buyer so that you can close more deals in a meaningful and results driven conversations. So, what I'm going to do is bring in our guest. We have Keith Marchiano, who's the program manager of sales enablement at Pax8 Academy. How you doing today, Keith?
Good, Dan. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. You know, you've been working closely with MSPs, helping them to shift the way or shift through that way on how to sell, from pitching solutions to having those meaningful results driven conversations. So I'm excited to have you here today and kick things off. With that being said, for our audience that might not be familiar with you, could you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate being able
Yeah.
to reach your audience and hopefully give them some insight and a couple little nuggets to take away and they can start using today in their MSP. So,
Absolutely.
as you said, I'm Keith Marchiano. I am the Academy Program Manager for Sales Enablement. Basically, long way of saying I've built out a whole bunch of sales content and curriculum to deliver to the MSPs. And always kind of say is like, hey, why should you listen to me in the first place? I've got 30 years of sales management and leadership experience. I've been in part of Pax8 and the Academy team for almost 4 years now, coaching MSPs. Prior to that, I was in the MSP world for 15 years. Came in through the sales door, and because prior to that, I actually sold copiers to really start my sales career. And I'm dating myself. If you couldn't tell the gray in the beard, I've got some age on me. I actually started selling copiers when they were actually born to where they are today. Not talking about the ones you sniffed back in school for you old guys out there.
Right. Yeah.
But today's multifunction device, I got to see that technology, come alive. And I did that for 8 years before coming in the MSP world, really just to learn the business. I love technology. More importantly, love having conversation with business executives about how to improve their companies. And through osmosis, and I always say sitting next to some smart engineers, I learned a lot about the business. And it gave me an opportunity, which was kind of a full circle moment for me. I spent the last 7.5 years actually running the IT services for Kyocera, the copier manufacturer.
Oh, yeah.
In the Mid-Atlantic area. They brought me in to build their MSP practice. They had none, so I built it from the ground up. So it's a little bit about me and why you should listen to me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love hearing stories when what I like to say is when MSPs move to the dark side, move to the vendor side, just because the knowledge that somebody has moving from the MSP side to the vendor side is incredible, and the value that provides to that vendor organization, but most importantly to the MSPs that are using those services is incredible. And because you get it, you've been there, you understand it, and that's just invaluable. And so thank you for that. I greatly appreciate that, and I also appreciate your background. The overview. We got a lot to cover today. It's an exciting topic, and it's not just about sales tactics, right? It's about reshaping the way that we think the conversations, and think through those conversations with our prospects. It's from mindset to listening to uncovering their needs. And, you have to have a full framework from that perspective. And so with that being said, let's kick things off and let's get started.
Sure. Sounds good. Kind of like you said, it's been a pretty cool ride in this industry. I mean, when I joined it, we weren't even called MSPs. We're more VARs, right? Selling hardware, project work with some support in there. It's wow, just incredible seeing obviously technology change over the last 20 years, but throw on top of that how we've evolved as MSPs. And one thing that we'll discuss is our buyer does not care about how great your people are, your services, or your tool set, your stack,
Right.
because every MSP is saying it. So they hear it from multiple MSPs that they're the best. So how do you get over that hurdle? Dan, let me ask you a question. What do you think the MSP, their biggest competitor is?
Well, I mean, there's I think a few answers to that. Of course, in one sense, you could say they're themselves, right? Because they're competing with themselves, but they're also competing with what the client thinks is important and what they think they can do as well.
Yep, very good. The other piece is when we start focusing on ourselves a little too much, it confuses our buyer. Again, a topic we'll talk about. The biggest competition is our prospect not doing anything, staying status quo, and that's what we're going to get around today. So,
Yeah.
brings me to my first slide. This is
Yeah.
our real competition. 60%. This is background from DCM Insights. They kind of specialize in this customer balance research of kind of the buyer side. In our industry, 60% of our prospects will decide, I don't see the value. The juice isn't worth the squeeze to switch providers. And most of that stems from during our sales cycle, our sales process with the buyer. The current provider fixes stuff enough to warrant, hey, it's not worth it of training and developing another IT company to learn about my stuff. Not to mention, we've done a very good job as an industry to make our prospects, our clients, a little more sticky.
Yeah.
Right. So, through managed services, through cloud services like 365, Microsoft Stack, maybe Azure, other cloud services, our security services and protecting their business. We've made it sticky for the consumer, our buyer, not to make a switch. The average small business sticks with an MSP now for 8 years on average.
Yep.
I remember my MSPs, I just had clients forever. They were with me for a long period of time. They evolved and grew with me. That is because part of it is we have made them stickier. It's harder to switch. I remember, 12 years ago, around that time, I always said, I wish small businesses would really value what the MSP brings, right? And we weren't doing a lot back then, patching, updates, backup disaster recovery, some low-level security. Cloud was starting to kind of kick in. So it wasn't as sticky as we've evolved. And especially with COVID and the remote workforce, people stay with their providers, even if they're not doing a great job. So that leads to the question, like, what the heck do we do?
Right.
Which is why, we created the result selling framework. You kind of teed it up at the beginning. I will say this, the best organizations, and, let's face it, the typical MSP is led by somebody that has a technical background, not a sales background.
Yeah.
The typical MSP does not have a sales process or a framework wrapped around it. And this becomes a challenge as we grow and scale because we're saying different things. Maybe the owner has their sales process in their head, and one day they want to hire a salesperson, or maybe they have a salesperson. If they don't have a framework, we're not saying the same things across the organization. And when I say the word buyer today, I was kind of tee this up for everybody. That could be our client or a prospect. They're our buyer. So result selling framework was made for the buyer. Doesn't matter. You can use, you get a good sales framework. This works for, your QBRs, your strategy meetings with your clients, your technology business planning process, and definitely works for identifying and qualifying your ideal client, which we're going to get into.
I want to jump in real quick.
Sure.
When you talk about the mindset, that many MSPs feel as if that they're technical first. They're not thinking about the sales and marketing, or even more importantly, they're not thinking about them in that business owner, business leader role. And sometimes I think they feel as if they start having discussions about their business, that maybe they're stepping outside of their lane. But that's exactly where we need to be, right?
We definitely do. We need to be having business conversations more than the technical conversation.
Yeah.
Think of it again, this kind of result selling framework, the foundation starts with understanding your buyer and who they are, what they care about, how their job is measured, what stresses they deal with on a day-by-day basis.
Yeah.
And you have to have a business conversation because the majority of our buyers are not technical people.
No.
They're all office managers, operations manager. You have the economic buyer, which is your CEO, CFO, controller, owner, those type of people. So altogether, we got to start with the buyer. We got to understand what they care about, and we got to tap into what things are impacting their company. Some of the things we'll get into. So we got to start by asking good questions, uncovering the prospect needs, understand how they buy or how they will buy or determine how they will buy our services. Very foundational. A lot of people, MSPs, we jump in, we hear a problem and we jump right in. Well, I kind of joke, like we strap on our superhero cape and come flying in to save the day,
right,
without digging deeper to truly understand the problem itself. And we'll kind of go into this. This is an overview of like how we built out this kind of foundational piece upon layers to get to the part where you step up to be able to talk about ourselves. You kind of see the first part, the first 3 steps is about the buyer. The last part is basically proving that we're the best fit for that buyer, or we're offering the right solution to that buyer. And a lot of MSPs do it backwards. We talk about proving, we tell stories, we talk about ourselves instead of learning about them.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than talking about ourselves and talking about, all the things that might get us excited, all the technical geeky stuff. And that's the quickest way to lose interest of our audience.
Yeah, we then fall into that commodity trap.
Yeah.
And we confuse the buyer, and they don't know our buyer does not know how to buy IT services. Our job is to get them into our car and take them on that journey, on that road trip, and help them understand how technology is going to help their business. More importantly, solve the problems that are impacting some of the value drivers that they care about. So those are probably the 2 biggest things. I put this up here for a reason. When it comes to salespeople, when it comes to us as MSPs, we do not listen enough. We talk about how great our people are, our services are, all the tools that we have in our stack, without really first understanding, does the buyer even care about those things? Are they having problems in those areas? Number 1 sales skill that I coach salespeople on is active listening. We've got across the board as an industry, we got to do better with that. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. So you better start listening to, 1, understand that client's business better than your competition. So when we get into result selling framework, this all starts with the foundation of being audible ready, which is being ready to share how we've solved that problem before, but more importantly, ask good questions. So we're doing less talking, we're listening, seeking to understand how that company ticks, and the roadblocks that get in the way for them to achieve their goals.
Keith, I love this slide. I love this image just because I think it hits home for a lot of us. we all, I think we all think that we're truly listening, but really we're just waiting for a chance to talk. I think we've all been guilty of this. I'll raise my hand. We've all been guilty of nodding, and we're already planning for what we're ready to say next. And we've left out that the genuine component of listening. We might be listening, but are we genuinely listening to what they're telling us? Because they might be giving us gold. They could be giving us pure gold that will allow us to, respond back to them in a way that's going to connect and tie into what they just told us.
100%. Like, I'm with you. Like my wife always looks at me and says, I don't know how you've been so successful in sales in your past, because you're horrible at actively listening, right? We get diverted by like attention things like the phone or the
Yeah.
TV in front of the buyer. We get distracted by what you just said, which is we're thinking of the next question, or we're ready to hop in to solve that problem right then and there, when we should be just sitting back and listening to what they're saying and the stresses in their lives, and how we should be thinking about, like, jotting down on notes of how we can make it better, but hold back. I always kind of coach my partners. It's like the movie Braveheart. There's Mel Gibson with his war paint on. His troops are ready to attack the other side, and he's like telling them to hold.
Right.
You just kind of, you're waiting for the right moment to be able to be interject, which is that audible ready component.
Yeah.
This leads to the next part, which is a great diagram, great description. The first time appointment with a prospect is like a first date.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great analogy to use. And I've got two images here that are telling two different stories, obviously. One side, you have interaction. It looks like two people are engaged with each other. Whereas the one on the right, the guy's just probably talking about himself, his car, whatever. There's actually a commercial that really actually is a car commercial, I think, now, that kind of does it. And the lady actually, it's a automatic drive up, and the car pulls up and she runs out of town. This is what happens in our world when we don't listen and we kind of go through and hurry through. I call it racing to the proposal instead of slowing down to seek to understand. We deliver the proposal, and then we wonder why we're not getting a second date, or they're not wanting to marry us, right?
Yeah.
Think about this. On a first date, I ask this question when I speak. Are you asking that person to marry you on the first date? Like, that would be like psycho alert, right? That might have the other person taken off running for the hills, right? We haven't earned the right to provide a proposal if we haven't truly understood that client, that buyer's process, and also their problems. Seek to understand them more, right? Yeah. If you looked at getting to that promised land of, getting engaged, getting married, right? It's building that know, like, and trust relationship. The challenge we have in the sales thing is we typically get 2 to 3 dates before we're delivering a proposal in most sales processes. We should be, right? We should have at least 2 qualifying meetings before we at least get to the, delivering recommendations to somebody, because we just haven't learned enough about them. So we've got this challenge that we don't get, a year or two. In some cases, larger companies, it may take the pre-sale side, right, to draw the interest a little bit longer to get to this point of like, hey, they want to date us.
Right.
And then it doesn't mean they're going to stay with us. So our job needs to kind of build these conversations so that way it's more engaging. We're understanding more about the other side, the person that we're looking to bring in. And I coach partners all the time. It's not only important to qualify a buyer, we may want to disqualify them.
Exactly.
Yeah. For a prospect, they might not be a good fit, right? They might want break fix hourly. Their budget might not be in alignment with what they have. They have no problems. If you ask questions and you uncover no problems, there's no sale. So why are we continuing on, right? Why are we putting out there our proposal just in hopes? I always kind of say, like, this isn't a Star Wars movie, right? Star Wars, for all you Star Wars fans, rebellions are built on hope. Sales pipelines are not. So, if we have a hope line, we're kidding ourselves on what we're actually going to close. So,
well, I think too, we're so eager, for the almighty dollar, right? We're so like, they want to spend money, right? But if they're not the right fit, we have to come to the realization that all sales is not good sales, and that we want to make sure that they fit the ideal client profile, and it's just as good for us as it is for them. And it does take time. I think there was a time in which, back in the days when it was more, you know, shifting from break fix to moving into the beginning days of managed services, where really you could take care of pretty much any client. But so much has evolved, so much has changed, especially as we're looking at cybersecurity. And it's much more complex. And we have to stay true to who we are, make sure that we are selling and staying true to what we have in our wheelhouse. And it does take time. I remember the days where MSPs, having conversations with them, they'd be like, I closed the deal in one sale, or I'm sorry, I closed the deal in one meeting. And and nowadays it is a process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even referrals aren't as quick and easy as they used to be. They're easier sales than kind of finding it on your own. You kind of hit the nail on the head. Is like, it's a different process now of getting to know people. And we're not going to cover it today, but there's a lot of foundational things that if you don't have them in place, like who is my buyer? Who's my ideal buyer or targeted buyer? So honing in on an industry, a certain size industry, is very vital to this. Knowing what value and business problems you solve is going to help you be audible ready and get to that storytelling. But yeah, you kind of really touched on a lot of things that resonate very well in our industry. I'll go back to what we said before, which is we kind of race and talk about ourselves. Story I share a lot is, a couple of years ago, I was looking for a new deck for my backyard. A lot of people that know me know I love to barbecue. I've got like four grills on my deck. I have a serious problem, Dan, when it comes to grilling meat and smoking meat. So
Yeah.
I need room for my grills. I need to have a safe deck. So my deck at the time was a wood deck.
Yeah.
And anybody has a wood deck, we know that things kind of start bellowing up, right? The wood starts curling up. Things like that can happen. Ages, it warps. You got to stain it and clean it every year. No big deal. I can do that. I'm not very handy, and the way my deck was made with angles is very complex. It would have been hard for me to fix it. So I thought I could fix it, and then I discovered the safety, the main support beams. I had 4 support beams holding up the front of the deck. 2 of them were rotting from the bottom. So now it became a safety concern and totally outside of my scope. So I went to, I started researching decking companies, right? I knew one person that his daughter and my daughter played on softball together growing up. So I knew him. I trusted him. He was my person I reached out to. And then I did my Google search and reached out to 2 other decking companies. This is exactly what our buyer does for MSP services, by the way.
Yeah.
I shared with him. He came out, looked at the deck. He took a look at what was going on, and then he saw the safety concern. And he's like, look, I could fix these boards. I can't fix those support boards without kind of replacing a little bit of the framework. It's going to be in your advantage from a safety standpoint to replace the deck. So, and again, the way it was designed, he just kind of went through it. And when he delivered his recommendations to me, he kind of laid it out. Like, here's a replacement for the wood deck. Here's a replacement for using the composite type of deck. So it's maintenance free side. And he kind of went through that and asked me questions of like, how much money you're spending to maintain it, how much time are you taking, et cetera, to maintain your deck. Well, with maintenance free, all you got to do is wash it down, hose it down from time to time. So he gave me those options. No point, and I went with him, by the way. I've got a nice, beautiful deck out back.
Yeah.
At no point during his process did he talk about the screws or nails he used to put the deck together, the tools. He didn't even talk about his team that would come out to do it. He just basically said, we can get it done by this time frame. You'll be barbecuing before you know it, and your family's going to be safe, and anybody you have come over is going to be safe.
Yeah.
That's the conversation we need to keep in the back of our mind when we go through it. Just think about buying a vehicle these days, totally different, right? Keep real world instances in our mind, and that points to this buyer focus, right? The top level is what the buyer cares about, right? They need to determine requirements. Do I make a switch? I got to evaluate all these options. I got to mitigate my risk. Your buyer may be responsible for the selection of the current IT company. We need to know this stuff. And we do that by asking questions to uncover what problems they're having and uncover objections or obstacles in the sales process way before we deliver a proposal.
And this is huge. I mean, I think we focus too much on our own process, but the buyer is already thinking about, things that in their mindset as far as risk and options and outcomes. And once we align to their perspective, everything changes. You give that example of not talking about the screws or the nails or any of the tools involved. Think about an attorney. Let's say it's an attorney that one of the attorneys is the quote unquote default technician. They're the default IT guy, and they're billing $300 an hour, and how they're being pulled away from their work. Learning about those aspects of it and how they're unable to focus on what their core job is. At no point during that conversation are we talking about we can do your patches, we can make sure that you have all the security tools involved. To them, that might be important, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about being hammered by, hearing a call down the hallway from an end user saying, I got a problem again. And that $300 an hour attorney, which probably is cheap, these days, that $300 an hour attorney is getting up to go solve a technology problem.
Perfect story, Dan. Absolutely. And that's what happens. This is their journey.
Yeah.
Not ours. They've invited us along for the ride. Now we got to control the sales process, but this is their journey that we're going on. So we have to guide them through this process. And I think the biggest visual out of this diagram is, the gray area is all about the buyer, letting them understanding their business, their problems across the board. We need to be thinking about this, how we can make them money, how we can save them money, and how we can protect their money. To your point, that $300 an hour attorney they're losing money if that person's not billable. If they can't access their case management software, they're not making money. We need to figure those things out. And then the things that could, put them at risk, right? A lot of times we get all hung up on our security tools. Why don't we start with just understanding if they care about security? What an hour of downtime cost their business, and we might need to dig into it. We need to get our shovels out and start digging. They say a problem, and we got to continue to dig that hole for them. And the best way to do that is, what's an hour of downtime cost your practice?
Right.
Everybody's experienced a power outage before, and which is, power's been out for at least an hour, even during like a storm or something like that. What was that impact? And if they I don't know, well, let's figure it out. Let's take, you're billing at $300 an hour. Let's take the opportunity cost out. Let's start with what you're paying your people.
Yeah.
Maybe be conservative. Hey, $30 an hour. We know an attorney law office is paying more than $30 an hour to their attorneys, even their paralegals. Maybe admin are at $30 an hour.
Right.
But you get conservative on that side and you say, hey, you got 30 employees at $30 an hour. That's just from your people, $900 an hour, because if the power goes out, you still got to pay your people. And then you get into, like you said, lost opportunity, not being able to bill, not being able to track your time against the case of that, that you're going to be billed back to that client, and you can kind of keep building that conversation. I think if you take anything away from this as a MSP, we're on their journey. So we need to determine their requirements, understand how they evaluate options, how they will determine between us and their current provider and us and any other providers they're looking at. And then the mitigate risk is basically, we got to make this easy for them. We got to appeal to not only the logical side, this problem and result side, but also the emotional side of this purchase, right? I don't want to make the same mistake again. I don't want to choose the wrong IT company and, look like the idiot that can't figure out, who to select, and we select the wrong one that costs us more money. We have to do the same thing again 3-5 years down the road, right? That's what our buyer is thinking.
And it's a process to do that. Now, there is a question that came up from Fred. He wanted to know what the last three statements were. You had mentioned to make them money, to save them money, and to
protect their money.
Protect their money. There we go.
Yep. Good question, Fred. Yep. If you keep that in the back of your mind, like we're going to talk about this in a second, the 3 value drivers. If I look at this, there's 3 value drivers. I don't care what industry you're in. If you're an owner or an executive, for us as MSPs, we're trying to get to that economic buyer, the one that determines if they're going to allocate extra money or, extra budget to us. They're thinking of 3 things in their business all day long. How do I grow my business? How do I make more money, improve profitability, gain a competitive edge? All under that grow the business side.
Yep.
How do I improve efficiencies? How do I reduce costs? How do I improve productivity? How do I improve my relationships with employees, clients, and vendors? That's all under the gain efficiencies umbrella. And then the final one is reduce risk. I want to make decisions that are going to lower impacts to my business, lower impacts to profitability and efficiencies inside my company. We kind of gravitate as MSPs as like, we hear reduce risks right to security solutions. That's why I say protect their money, because it might not even be a security incident that causes them not to be able to access line of business applications. We've got a remote workforce on our hands. Like how, that could severely risk the business of making money or being as efficient as it possibly can. We need to dive into those conversations.
Love it.
The other thing is, it just says change your mindset, think like the buyer. A lot of MSPs, especially owner-led, technical-led MSPs, have a mind block when it comes to selling. They look at selling as this sleazy, sliming side of business, right? They think of the used car salesman in the plaid jacket from the 70s. So
right.
They think somebody that's just not listening to them, that's thinking about their commissions and things like that. That's not who a good salesperson is. Goes back to our listening slide. A good salesperson is listening. They're understanding the problems and empathizing with the situation. And they're kind of moving it forward. And it goes to my next slide, is at the end of the day, we're all problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a mindset that we're here to solve the buyer's problem, client or prospect again, if we have that mindset every single time, our focus is going to be discovering what problems they're having and how it's impacting their company. I've got a lot of partners that mention that another acronym called RFP, request for proposal. If they don't have any problems, what are we doing, right? Are we wasting our time just throwing a proposal out the door?
Right.
No problem, no sale. So that's why, going back to that slide from before, we've got to understand what problems they have. We got to ask good questions around their problems. So I want to ask questions around their industry, right? If we're focusing on an industry, I want to ask industry specific questions. I want to ask questions around their cybersecurity posture. Do they actually care about cybersecurity? Do they have cybersecurity insurance? And what do they do to make sure that if something happens and they have to enact that policy, that it can be, that can protect their business, that the insurance company will pay that claim, right? Digging deeper, problem solving is a key part, right? So doing this will help us uncover the urgent problems they have, obviously, but hopefully by asking good questions, we dive into those latent issues that impact, again, those 3 value drivers: growing the business, gaining efficiencies, minimizing risk. We should be asking questions around that so that way we can solve problems that are impacting the business around that. And impact is probably the key word.
Right.
Very simple graphic here that we need to do. And it's probably not the best one. I probably have to do a little bit more. Well, I'm a very visual person, Dan, so this doesn't do it for me as a visual person, but realistically, our job every single time we're in front of the buyers, what's going on now? What's the current state? How are things today? When we uncover the problems and we find out like what's going on inside that problem, not just understanding the problem, but going deeper of examples around it, we need to ask the question is like, how is that problem impacting your company? Going back to those 3 value drivers, right? Is it impacting that company from making money? Is it impacting that company from reducing cost or gaining efficiencies? And is it increasing the risk to that business? I want to ask that question. How is it impacting it? So it comes out of their mouths. This is a we conversation, not an our conversation, right? We can't, that's why we can't go down the road of us talking about ourselves anymore. We got to understand what they're looking for, then the future state of where they want to be. What are their goals, short-term, long-term? Revenue, growth, what they want to be, how they want to deliver their services to their clients, how they want to improve upon those efficiencies. Where do they want to go? And as we ask these bunch of questions of current state and we understand the future state, we're hopefully creating this chasm. That's why I kind of said we need a better visual. We need to create this gap, like a canyon, that the buyer's sitting there like, I can't get to where I want to go without solving these problems. This will help you reduce that 60% piece that we talked about in the beginning of indecision, reducing it down, saying, you know what, we're in a spot right now where if we don't fix it, we'll never get to the goals that we set for our organization, short-term and long-term goals.
And this truly is the heart of it. I mean, because if we don't know what their drivers are, we can't connect what we do to the results that they're looking for. And, I think sometimes when we go through these things, if we do sit back and listen and we deliver solutions to what their needs are, that's exactly what that's going to capture their attention. And that's where we have to stop. And I'd love to have you interject here too, is that's where we have to stop and we have to keep ourselves from throwing in a whole bunch more stuff that we feel like we got to tell them about. If it doesn't relate back to what their needs are we just wasting time and muddying up the water?
Yeah, really good point. We need to seek to understand. I always kind of say the best salespeople create curiosity. The best salespeople are curious by nature. I want you to think about this is you want to tap into your inner 4 and 5-year-old. And what I mean by that is, anybody that had kids, why daddy? Hey, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why are dogs and cats around? Like, why? Like they ask a ton of questions. They want to know. We got to tap into that, right? We got to be knowledgeable. Even if we know the answers, we don't know the answers or the problems that they have. So we need to kind of seek it out.
Right.
And it's also it's these wedge questions that create gaps between them and their current provider and them and any other IT company. and them and staying status quo. We got to do that. So asking questions, I always kind of give this nugget of goodness out. The best thing you can do, it's an easy acronym. We're MSPs, we're full of acronyms. So it's the word TED, like the guy, TED.
Yeah.
TED stands for tell me about, explain to me, and describe for me. Tell me about, explain to me, and describe for me. So if you're sitting in a meeting and I don't want this to be a script, right? People can read like this person's script, especially today when we're selling a lot in the first initial meeting through Zoom or Teams. People can read scripts, rehearse stuff. So I want you to have conversations. And if you can keep that acronym TED, you can always ask, hey, tell me more about that. Tell me about what happens when you said you had a problem with onboarding and offboarding employees. Tell me how that impacts your company. Tell me more about that problem. Explain to me what your current provider currently does. Explain to me what the current provider said when you brought this problem up to them, right? You can kind of use that without sounding rehearsed.
Right.
Last piece on this on this image. Before we can get down to the decision criteria, which are the harder questions, like budget, like let's go back to that first date. You're not going to ask somebody on the first date how much money they make. You have nowhere near earned that right. Kind of the same thing. This is, again, not a race to the proposal. They're probably not going to share the accurate information or any information at all if you ask it too early. That's why you've got to ask questions to understand the business, show that you truly care about their business and understanding the problems that they have and understanding their business to earn the right to go down and ask those questions around stakeholders and budget timelines. And then you see the very last quadrant is where we articulate our value. We have held off talking about ourselves to this point.
Which is a difficult thing to do.
Hard to do. It'll take practice. Do not practice this on prospects. Practice this in-house of being better, of asking questions. Write them down to start with. Have them as a cheat sheet when you're with a prospect, especially to start, until you build that muscle memory. I was a baseball coach. I taught that all the time. To perfect your swing, it comes down to muscle memory every step of the way. Sales is the same way. It's not being scripted, rehearsed. It's asking questions and being able to kind of roll with the conversation, kind of like we are. We're having none of this, we're asking questions. You're asking questions to me. We're ejecting and having a conversation around the topic at hand.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do in front of them. That's how we become a problem solvers, by doing this.
Love it.
Just for everybody out there, these were the value drivers got kind of honed on. This is what every single buyer that you interface with wants. Put yourselves in shoes of these executives and these are point people. This is what they care about. Even if I'm like a technical buyer and I'm a director of IT or an office manager, efficiency is really what I'm dying for. That's the main piece. However, we got these other buyers in the organization that care about the growth of the business. We got to bring those stakeholders together. And the only way that point of contact is going to get you or allow you to get in front of the CEO, the owner, the CFO is that you got to provide something different, some sort of differentiator between you and the competition. Starts with asking questions, finding out the problems, and then articulating your value through case studies, white papers, and storytelling. That gets you to the promised land. But it all starts with what we shared at the beginning, which is asking questions. I have two quotes that I kind of hit on with every MSP. The first one is, a full pipeline cures all ills. I think you said it earlier, is we get desperate. The reason we blow through a sales process is because we've lost a client. We haven't sold got brought on a new client in months or years, and we get desperate. Fill the pipeline. It makes it easier. You got to keep it going. The other one is this. We sound the same. It creates buyer confusion. It commoditizes what we do. We continue to talk about what we're doing. So we need to kind of reframe what we're doing. And the result selling framework, what that's going to do is it's going to create a written, documented process. That way we can use it today. And as we grow and we start building a sales team or sales organization, everybody is speaking the same language across the board. We're all asking questions and using this methodology to grow the business, to improve our efficiencies, because bottom line, if we bring on the right clients, our support costs are going to be down.
Right.
We're going to have all of our clients on the same technology stack. So that's going to reduce our risk of them being compromised. It all ties back together. And I got this is kind of really where we go. But if you look at this triangle, this is the result selling framework that, from me as my fellow coaches, what we do at Academy through different ways. We have on demand, which is free content for any PAX-8 partner. So if you're a PAX-8 partner, there's a lot of courses that you can kind of use and consume today and learn. Then we have instructor-led trainings and one-on-one, personal trainer coaches to kind of guide you through this process.
And this is great stuff. I mean, because, what we've talked about today is we're scratching the surface. And, PAX-8, you guys have, so much more so much more of a ability to dive deeper into the framework, through your coaching, your training, and you also have your result selling framework podcast. And if you could give us a little bit more deep dive into some of those things that you guys can do to help out our audience members.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of like I mentioned is like, we meet the partner where they are, right? If you're under $1 million, maybe, your budget's tight. Maybe you just want to learn, most MSPs offer training to their engineers, but we do very little to improve our sales skills. So PAX-8 Academy, we offer, really wherever you are, training capabilities to learn and improve in sales. We've got, for example, we've got the on-demand courses. Like I said, you can access them now. The podcast, the Result Selling Framework podcast, wherever you stream your podcast today, you just search PAX-8 Result Selling Framework. Kind of like you do, Dan, as I bring in people in the MSP industry that have been doing this a while, and we talk about a certain subject that revolves around MSPs growing their business and what we do, right? Yeah. A lot of conversations in there around security and AI, which are hot topics. And of course, if you listen to any time during this call, it's how to position that stuff without talking about it, right? Understanding how AI, what you need to do as an MSP and have those AI conversations or security conversations. So we've got that. Obviously, I always ask everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I do an episode called Sales Pitch. It's like a 2-3 minute segment on PAX-8 Academy Live, which is also on the PAX-8 YouTube channel. So you can watch it there. Inside of Academy is also links to the podcast as well as those sales pitches. We have mission briefings. So I'll be in Vancouver in September, on September 17th, and then in Tampa, Florida on October 16th. It's a boot camp around this topic, result selling framework. Nice. No charge to the partners, right? Our vendors are covering the cost. You just need to sign up for it and show up. And of course, you have one-on-one sales coaching. I kind of look at it from this standpoint. I'll give you this last analogy. We can help you in sales. We can help you in operations wherever you are. So I kind of use it as a weight loss journey, right? Or a fitness journey. Some of us might be content with having a home gym, and we're happy just kind of doing some workouts as needed and trying to eat right at home. It's like our on-demand content. You kind of do it yourself.
Yeah.
Step two is you go to a gym, and you kind of have the equipment there for you and some people that can give you some guidance. That's where our peer groups and our instructor-led trainings come into play. Maybe at that point you say, you know what, I struggle at nutrition, I need help with that, or I need an actual exercise plan, I need somebody to hold me accountable to where I want to go weight loss wise. And that's where you get a personal trainer in one-on-one sales coaching. So like I said, Dan, we can meet people wherever they are. Go back to my tie-in. Why am I here after 20 some odd years of selling? 25 years, good night, that's crazy, of selling. Why am I here?
Yeah.
I felt it was time for me to change. And the thing I wanted to do was, like, I was very blessed in my journey in the MSP world. I feel like I came in at the right time. I got to sit next to some smart engineers and learn the business, and I got rewarded for my passion for this industry. And I had a lot of people help me along that journey. This is my way of giving back. This is my why. If I can help MSPs grow to get to, and one thing we say is we want to get MSPs growing, that they're getting at least 1 to 2 managed service clients, ideal clients, target client profile, 1 to 2 a month. That's growing your business. Can you imagine if you added 1 to 2 managed service clients at $5,000 a month across the next year?
It's incredible.
What that would do for your business.
Yeah.
That's my why and passion behind this. And whatever I can do to help the partner, that's why I'm here. So thanks again for having me on. I appreciate this.
No, I appreciate being here, and and you add those up, month after month. Those all keep continuing to compound, and all the things that you've been wanting to do and looking to grow your business, you can achieve that by bringing in the right clients, continuing to bring in the clients, and it can all be done through this framework. My big takeaway is, how important it is to flip that script, to stop making the conversations about us and to start making it about the buyer. And for everybody joining us, I encourage you to, take just one piece, just one thing that you've learned today from Keith and implement it in your next sales call. And you'll start to see how those results will benefit you quickly. And Keith has provided some great information here. He got access to his LinkedIn. Of course, you can check out pax8.com. There is a QR code to check out their Academy on Demand. If you are at the everythingmsp.com website, you can search for Pax8, learn more about them there, as well as being able to connect to them. But with that being said, Keith, thank you very much for being here today and sharing all of your knowledge. And everybody, until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everyone.